This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode 29. This week, we honor the year 1997 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 1997. We also look at the new Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2022, and our Spotlight Walk of Fame is the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, California. This podcast celebrates those who have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll also look at the case for certain artists to be inducted into the Hall who aren't there yet. Plus, every week we'll discuss a different musical Hall of Fame, Walk of Fame, or museum and celebrate someone who's been inducted into them. Let's start with our main focus of the podcast, which is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Hall Foundation was established on April 20th, 1983. Former Atlantic Records chairman Ahmet Ertegun was the head of the foundation at the time. 3 years later, a committee chose Cleveland, Ohio to be the site of the physical location for the museum over Detroit, Michigan, New York City, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Memphis, Tennessee, and Cincinnati, Ohio. I say physical location because members have actually been inducted into the Hall since 1986, before the building was even opened. Cleveland was chosen because of what DJ Alan Freed did to promote rock and roll, including mainstreaming the phrase rock and roll, which was originally black slang for sex, and for also holding the first rock and roll concert. Ground was broken for the building on June 7, 1993. It opened on September 1, 1995 at 1100 Rock and Roll Boulevard on the shore of Lake Erie. The Hall gets over 400,000 visitors a year on average. Normal hours of operation are between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. except for Thursdays when they're open until 9 p.m. They are normally open later in the summer months. General admission at the moment is $30. Children 6 through 12 are $20. College students, first responders, military members, and Northeast Ohio residents are $25, and kids 5 and under, Hall of Fame members, and Cleveland residents are free. ID is required to get the discounts. Rockhall.com is their website. That's ROCKHALL.com. And as with all places these days due to COVID restrictions, check with the website for updated information and hours. The year was 1997. The inflation rate in America was at 2.34%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed out the year at 7,908. The Federal Reserve's interest rate was 8.50% at the end of the year. Average cost of a new house was $124,100. Average income for the year, $37,006. Monthly rent averaged out at $576. Gallon of gas set you back $1.22, and the average cost of a new car was $16,900. President Bill Clinton began his second term after beating Senator Bob Dole in 1996. Tony Blair was elected Prime Minister of Great Britain. Madeleine Albright became the first female Secretary of State in America. In a scene straight out of the movie Heat, 2 robbers with automatic weapons and armor-piercing bullets shot and injured 17 police officers during their escape. Timothy McVeigh was sentenced to death for the bombing of the Oklahoma Federal Building. The Woolworth stores closed after being in business for almost 120 years. Turkey and Cyprus almost started a war over missiles that Cyprus had bought. The Hubble Space Telescope was repaired after its lenses had been damaged before the telescope went into orbit a few years earlier. The Hale-Bopp comet came close to Earth. 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult committed suicide thinking that their spirits would catch a ride on that comet. No word yet as to whether their spirits actually did catch that ride. The NASA Pathfinder space probe landed on Mars. Boeing and McDonnell Douglas merged, and Great Britain handed over control of Hong Kong to China. Members of the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement took hundreds of hostages at the Japanese embassy in Lima, Peru for 126 days. A tornado struck downtown Miami. A military coup happened in Sierra Leone, Africa. The Toyota Prius hybrid car was unveiled in Japan. America wouldn't get the car until 2000. Beanie Babies and Gigapets became a thing in 1997. Famous people who were born in 1997 include actors Chloe Grace Moretz, Bella Thorne, Asa Butterfield, Maisie Williams, and Olivia Holt, YouTube star Jake Paul, TikTok star Bella Porsche, race car driver Max Verstappen, Afghani activist Malala Yousafzai, the McCaughey septuplets, models Kylie Jenner and Camila Morrone, gymnasts Simone Biles and Caitlin Ohashi, golfer Lydia Ko, football player Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray and Trayvon Diggs, tennis players Naomi Osaka and Alexander Zverev, hockey players Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews, boxer Teofimo Lopez, soccer players Marcus Rashford and Tammy Abraham, swimmer Katie Ledecky, basketball players Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. Famous people who passed away in 1997 include Princess Diana, who was killed in an auto accident as her car was being chased by paparazzi through the streets of Paris. Fashion designer Gianni Versace was killed by a serial killer. Also passing away in 1997 were Mother Teresa, Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, explorer Jacques Cousteau, activist Betty Shabazz, real estate tycoon Harry B. Hemsley, businessman Jack Kent Cooke, actors Jimmy Stewart, William Hickey, Robert Mitchum, Burgess Meredith, Chris Farley, Joan Rice, Brian Keith, Edward Mulhare, Denver Pyle, Audra Lindley, Red Skelton, Jesse White, Charles Hallahan, Bill Zuckert, Toshiro Mifune, and Magna Gabor of the Gabor sisters, Snow White voice actress Adriana Caselotti, wrestler Brian Pillman, poet Allen Ginsberg, authors William S. Burroughs, Ann Petrie, and Harold Robbins, lawyer and Kennedy family member Michael Kennedy, magician Harry Blackstone Jr., socialite Pamela Harriman, golfer Ben Hogan, Jamaica Prime Minister Michael Manley, Judge William J. Brennan Jr., journalist Charles Kuralt, baseball players Curt Flood and Johnny Zandermeer, Detroit Mayor Coleman Young, psychic Gene Dixon, astronomer Eugene Schumacher, politician Paul Tsongas, comedian Pat Paulson, and film producer Dawn Steele. The Nobel Peace Prize was shared between Jody Williams from the United States and the International Campaign to Ban Landmines from Switzerland. CEO Andrew Grove of Intel was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year for being a pioneer in the semiconductor industry. George Clooney was named People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive for the first time. In technology, Steve Jobs officially rejoined Apple. The first cloned animal, Dolly the sheep, was announced. The Wall Street Journal website introduced the first paywall. The Nero CD burning software was released. Microsoft announced Windows 98, Yahoo introduced Yahoo Mail, Facebook.com went live, as did Craigslist.com and Netflix.com after Netflix changed its name from Kibble. Netflix definitely sounds better than Kibble. GoDaddy was founded, as was Kaspersky. Microsoft bought Web TV Networks and Hotmail. AOL bought CompuServe, and McCarthy merged with Network General. In video gaming, the Nintendo 64 hit Europe, but the big news was the controversy over the newly released video game Grand Theft Auto, which, if you've ever played the game, you know that it was just a little bit controversial. Other video games that were popular include GoldenEye, Final Fantasy VII, Star Fox 64, Age of Empires, Quake 2, Tomb Raider 2, Star Wars Jedi Knight, and fallout. In books, author J.K. Rowling published her first novel, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Other popular novels were written by Danielle Steele, Patricia Cornwell, Mary Higgins Clark, James Patterson, and John Grisham. In the nonfiction category, there were popular books by Billy Graham, Katharine Graham, O.J. prosecutor Marcia Clark, controversial O.J. trial figure L.A. cop Mark Furman, Sebastian Junger, who wrote the book The Perfect Storm, Frank McCourt, who wrote the book Angela's Ashes, biographer Kitty Kelly, and Andrew Morton, who caused quite a stir with his book on Princess Diana. In movies, Batman and Robin with George Clooney playing the Dark Knight came out. Other movies in 1997 include Lost Highway, The Game, Dante Peak, Liar Liar, Absolute Power, Breakdown, Devil's Advocate, Contact, The Fifth Element, Volcano, Good Will Hunting, Tomorrow Never Dies, Donnie Brasco, and L.A. Confidential. Another movie that was popular was a little-known, small-budget indie flick about some boat that sank. Actually, the movie Titanic was supposed to be a summer blockbuster movie, but got pushed back 6 months due to extra work that was needed on the movie. Released at the very end of 1997, it became a cultural phenomenon in 1998. At the time, it was the most expensive movie ever made with a budget of over $250 million. It would end up being the biggest movie of all time until Avatar broke that record. The movie would go on to take the lion's share of their 14 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and made stars out of Kate Winslet and former Growing Pains sitcom star Leonardo DiCaprio. While James Cameron won Best Director for the Academy Awards, neither Kate nor Leo would end up winning their Best Actress and Best Actor nominations. Those honors went instead to the stars of another movie, As Good as It Gets, Helen Hunt and Jack Nicholson. Kim Basinger won Best Supporting Actress for L.A. Confidential, and Robin Williams won Best Supporting Actor for Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting was also the first time that anyone heard of the guys who won Best Written Screenplay for writing Good Will Hunting, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, in one of the greatest bromances of all time. In sports, the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl, giving quarterback John Elway his first Super Bowl win after losing 3 times before. The game for the 1997 season was played in 1998 in San Diego. The halftime show was a salute to Motown, which featured Boyz II Men, Smokey Robinson, Martha Reeves, The Temptations, Queen Latifah, and the Grambling State University Marching Band. The Florida Gators won the NCAA College Football Championship. The Chicago Bulls won the NBA Basketball Championship. Then Michael Jordan retired for the second time. He would come back in 2001. The WNBA played their first season in 1997. The Houston Comets won the first WNBA championship. Arizona won the NCAA Men's College Basketball Championship, while Tennessee won the NCAA Women's College Basketball Championship. The Florida Marlins won baseball's World Series, and the Detroit Red Wings won hockey's Stanley Cup. Oscar De La Hoya won the WBC super lightweight boxing title. Mike Tyson bit the ear off of Evander Holyfield during their heavyweight boxing match. Jan Ullrich won the Tour de France. Silver Charm won the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness Stakes, but lost the Belmont Stakes to Touch Gold. Therefore, Silver Charm lost the Triple Crown. The Rochester Nighthawks won the Major Indoor Lacrosse League Championship. In golf, it was the year of this guy by the name of Tiger Woods. Tiger won the Masters Golf Tournament by 12 strokes, becoming the first African American to win the tournament. He also was the biggest moneymaker on the PGA Tour, making over $2 million that year. Other winners for the men were Ernie Els at the U.S. Open, Justin Leonard at the British Open, and Davis Love III at the PGA Championship. On the women's side, Betsy King won the Nabisco Dinah Shore, Krista Johnson won the LPGA Championship, Alison Nicholas won the U.S. Women's Open, and Colleen Walker won the Classique de Maurier. Annika Sorenstam, by the way, was the big money maker on the tour with $1.2 million. In tennis, Pete Sampras won the Australian Open and Wimbledon, while Gustavo Kuerten won the French Open and Patrick Rafter won the U.S. Open. On the women's side, Martina Hingis won 3 of the 4 majors, with Yvonne Maholi winning the French Open. Sweden won the Davis Cup. In soccer, Borussia Dortmund won the Champions League and FC Schalke won the UEFA Cup. In league championships, Manchester United won in England, AS Monaco won in France, Bayern Munich won in Germany, Juventus won in Italy, Real Madrid won in Spain, and DC United won in America. In motorsports, Jacques Villeneuve won the Formula One championship, Alex Zanardi won the kart championship, Tony Stewart won the Indy Racing League championship, and Jeff Gordon won his second NASCAR championship. Golfer Tiger Woods won the Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year, while tennis player Martina Hingis won the Associated Press Female Athlete of the Year. In television, shows that started in 1997 included VH1's Behind the Music series, Johnny Bravo, Playhouse Disney, Ally McBeal, Antiques Roadshow, Emerald Live, Daria, The Practice, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, Cow and Chicken, Stargate SG-1, The View, and South Park. Shows that ended included Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Gargoyles, Roseanne, the first time around, Married with Children, and the classic country music show Hee Haw. Brian Gumbel left the Today Show and was replaced by Matt Lauer. The top-rated TV shows for 1997 were ER, Seinfeld, Suddenly Susan, Friends, The Naked Truth, Fired Up, Monday Night Football, Single Guy, Home Improvement, and Touched by an Angel. At the Emmy Awards, Law & Order won Best Drama, and Frasier won Best Comedy. In music, the song Candle in the Wind, the Princess Diana edition, was first played at Princess Diana's funeral, then released as its own single. It became the biggest-selling single of all time worldwide. The biggest phenomenon of the year was also related to Great Britain, Spice Girl Mania, as the Spice Girls released their debut album. Other artists who burst onto the scene in 1997 included Third Eye Blind, the Backstreet Boys, Meredith Brooks, Duncan Sheik, Savage Garden, Paula Cole, and Hanson. The Spice Girls' Spice was the biggest-selling album of 1997, according to Billboard magazine. Other big albums were by Radiohead, U2, No Doubt, Notorious B.I.G., Puff Daddy, Mace, George Strait, Aerosmith, Scarface, Prodigy, Oasis, and Celine Dion. Big singles in 1997 included Jules' You Were Meant for Me, Puff Daddy's I'll Be Missing You, and Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, Toni Braxton's Unbreak My Heart, R. Kelly's I Believe I Can Fly, En Vogue's Don't Let Go, Mark Morrison's Return of the Mac, LeAnn Rimes' How Do I Live, and the Spice Girls' Wannabe. Artists who were born in 1997 include DJ Alan Walker, rappers Coi Leray, Lil Yachty, Rico Nasty, Blueface, Cupcake, Asia Doll, Kodak Black, and Lalissa Montauban, and singers Jungkook of BTS, Camila Cabello, Becky G, Her, Roseanne Park, Park Ji-min, Zara Larsson, Phineas O'Connell, Yorgos Smith, and Youngblood. Artists who passed away in 1997 included the Notorious B.I.G., who was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. Also, singers Townes Van Zandt, Michael Hutchence of INXS, John Denver, Jeff Buckley, Fela Kuti, Laura Nyro, Laverne Baker, Nicolette Larson, Ronnie Lane, Jimmy Rogers, Jimmy Witherspoon, Johnny Copeland, Thelma Carpenter, Billy McKenzie of The Associates, Ron Holden, Lawrence Payton of the Four Tops, guitarist Randy California, Luther Allison and Michael Hedges, Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, opera singer Charles Craig, conductor George Solti, drummer Tony Williams, and jazz violinist Stefan Grappelli. At the Grammys for that year's music, Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind won Album of the Year, while Sean Colvin's Sonny Came Home won Best Song and Record of the Year. Paula Cole was voted Best New Artist. At the Eurovision Singing Contest held in Dublin, Ireland, Katrina and the Waves from England won for the song Love Shine a Light. Katrina and the Waves were also one of the better-known Eurovision contestants since Celine Dion in 1988, with the band having found commercial success in 1985 with the hit song Walking on Sunshine. At the Tony Awards, Titanic won Best Musical, and Chicago won Best Revival of a Musical. Yes, Titanic was actually a musical back in the day, along with being a movie. At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, the Hall inducted King's Records founder Sid Nathan into the non-performers category. Mahalia Jackson and Bill Monroe were inducted into the Early Influencers category. And in the performers category, the Hall inducted Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Parliament Funkadelic, Joni Mitchell, the Young Rascals, the Jackson 5, and this next group. The brothers Gibb, or the Bee Gees as they're better known as, had two careers. The brothers of Barry, Robin, and Maurice were born on the Isle of Man in England and then lived in Manchester, England. They started out in a band called the Rattlesnakes in 1955. When the band broke up, they formed a band called Johnny Hayes and the Blue Cats. Johnny Hayes only lasted about 4 months as the Gibbs family moved to Queensland, Australia. And there, they plied their trade by playing at a racetrack as the entertainment break, and also in the resort towns along the coast. At this point, they found a manager who got them a record deal, and they came up with that name, the Bee Gees. They released about 3 singles every year that didn't actually do all that well, except for a minor hit called Wine & Women. And after 4 years, the brothers finally scored a major hit with their 12th song called Spicks and Specks. In 1967, they moved back to England in search of bigger success, and there they met up with the guy who would become instrumental in their success, record executive Robert Stigwood. Under Stigwood's hand, the Bee Gees had some big hits like Massachusetts and To Love Somebody. Then the pressure of fame got to them and they broke up in the late 1960s. They eventually got back together in the mid-1970s and started changing their sound to disco. It was at this point where fate took over and gave them their magnum opus, Saturday Night Fever. Here's some trivia about the movie that turned the Bee Gees into superstars. It was actually based on fake news. Here's what happened. In 1976, music and movie producer Robert Stigwood was looking for his next big hit. He had just come off of making 2 successful movie musicals at that point, Jesus Christ Superstar and The Who's Tommy. An article in New York Magazine caught his attention. It was titled The Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night by a guy by the name of Nick Cohen. The article told the story of a guy named Vinny and his buddies who were dancers in a discotheque in Brooklyn, New York, and who always dreamed of something bigger. Stigwood was hooked on the story and decided to turn the article into a movie. Vinny became Tony Manero. Stigwood got the Bee Gees, then grabbed an up-and-coming actor from a TV show and released the movie Saturday Night Fever. Saturday Night Fever became one of the biggest movies of the year, and it turned that actor, John Travolta, into an international superstar, along with getting him an Academy Award nomination for playing Tony. And it turned the Bee Gees into one of the biggest musical groups of the century and brought disco out of the minority and gay clubs and made the musical genre mainstream. Soon, every city had disco clubs. Radio stations changed their formats to disco, and even if they didn't, they at least had a top 10 disco list every single week just to stay relevant with the times. Now, this story would be pretty good right there, except that it is not the end of the story. In 1994, almost 18 years after the original magazine article came out, Nick Cohen fessed up. In an article in the Guardian newspaper in England, he admitted that he actually made up most of the article. See, he had just moved to New York City at that point in his life when he was hired to write the article, and he didn't know the neighborhood in Brooklyn well enough to know any of the guys there. The name of the discotheque, Odyssey 2000, was real, and Vinny and his friends were Italian, but that was all about the article that was real, to be honest. In fact, Vinny was actually based on a guy Nick knew from his old English neighborhood back in the 1960s. So you see, John Travolta and the Bee Gees owed their superstardom partially to fake news, which premiered in the June 7, 1976 issue of New York Magazine. Also, a little bonus trivia, June 7th also plays heavily into something else concerning John Travolta. On June 7, 1972, the Broadway musical Grease premiered, and when it was turned into a movie, Robert Stigwood again was the producer, and he again grabbed the guy he already made into a superstar, John Travolta, and gave him the main role. And the 1-2 punch of Saturday Night Fever and Grease made John Travolta into the hottest actor on the planet. So June 7th must be a pretty lucky day for Travolta. Back to the Bee Gees, though. After the megawatt success of Saturday Night Fever, the group put out another chart-topping album called Spirits Having Flown. The Bee Gees' younger brother, Andy, became a huge star in his own right with the album Shadow Dancing, with songs that were partially written by the brothers. Then, tragedy struck the family. First, the inevitable backlash against disco happened that crushed so many careers. Dance music went back to the underground, got mixed with more electronic music, and became techno, house music, trance music, and eventually the EDM explosion in the 2010s. The disco backlash completely hurt all of the brothers' careers. Both the band and Andy Gibb went from being the biggest worldwide acts in the late 1970s to being laughingstocks in the early 1980s, as people's taste went into corporate rock and a new sound that was coming across England at that point, new wave music. Brothers Maurice and Andy developed drug and alcohol problems. Andy passed away in 1988 from an inflammation of the heart due to a viral infection. Some people said that it was because his heart had been damaged from a cocaine addiction that had gotten completely out of control, but he had gotten over. But the damage was done at that time. It left his heart unable to cope with the viral infection. Regardless, Andy's passing at the age of 30 gutted the Bee Gees. They continued on, despite their problems, playing what turned out to be their final concert together as a trio in 2002. Then, in 2003, while waiting for surgery to take care of an intestine issue, Maurice had a heart attack and passed away in 2003 at the age of 53. The remaining brothers made appearances until 2012, when Robin Gibb, who had liver cancer, passed away at the age of 61 from kidney and liver issues. Since then, Barry has performed periodically with his son, along with his niece and nephew, along with keeping the band's legacy going with album releases and now a planned biopic. The Bee Gees have sold over 220 million records and have won 5 Grammy Awards, all for the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever. The soundtrack is number 132 on Rolling Stone's Top 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list. And even after Saturday Night Fever, they kept the disco sound going with their 1979 album, Spirits Having Flown. They have 35 top 100 singles, and during the Saturday Night Fever era, they had 3 of the top songs in the same week on the Billboard singles chart. They also wrote and produced chart-topping songs for a number of different artists, including Dionne Warwick, Barbra Streisand, and Andy Gibb. The group was also put into the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry in 2013. Presented for induction by Brian Wilson of the 1988 Hall of Fame inductees, the Beach Boys, and also by Raphael Sadig of the group Tony, the Bee Gees, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 1997. Before we look at the case for inducting someone into the Hall in the upcoming class, let us look at how people get into the Hall to begin with. The criteria for being inducted into the Hall was originally that, quote, artists have to have released their first record 25 years earlier and have created music whose originality, impact, and influence has changed the course of rock and roll, end quote. That interpretation has been updated in recent decades to include music that rock and roll influenced, like reggae, country, and hip-hop, and also the youth culture that music has influenced, and also vice versa. And that, kids, is why hip-hop artists have been inducted into the Hall. The different categories that people can be inducted for are for musical excellence, which is for artists, musicians, songwriters, and producers who have had a dramatic impact on the music; early influencers, artists whose music influenced rock music and youth culture, like, say, the jazz or blues; the Ahmet Ertegun Award, which is named for the famed record executive Ahmet Ertegun and goes to a non-performer who has had an impact on music, like record executives and managers. There's also now a category that inducts songs that have influenced music, like the Troggs' song Wild Thing. Of course, the most popular category is the performers category, which has everyone from Elvis Presley to Tina Turner. The different nominating committees decide who will make the official ballots for that year. Then, ballots are sent to 1,000 musicologists, executives, performers, and other artists and experts. The fans also get a chance to vote, with that vote usually being held on the Hall's website. Then from that, the final inductees are chosen. Now, with all that being said, let's look at making the case for putting an artist into one of the upcoming classes for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announced its inductees for this year's upcoming class. They are, in the performers category, Pat Benatar, along with her husband, guitarist Neil Giraldo; Duran Duran, Dolly Parton, Eminem, Eurythmics, Carly Simon, and Lionel Richie. In the award for musical excellence category, Judas Priest, along with producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, are in. In the early influencers category, Harry Belafonte and folk blues musician Elizabeth Cotten are in. The Ahmet Ertegun Award goes to a trio of people: entertainment lawyer Alan Grubman, entertainment executive and mogul Jimmy Iovine, and founder of legendary hip-hop record label Sugar Hill Records, Sylvia Robinson. Sylvia becomes the first African-American woman to receive the award. Also, this is the first time that the Hall has put in 6 different female artists and influencers into it, which is about time. I, of course, have some thoughts. First off, all of these people deserve to get in, including Lionel Richie, although I'm still really gnawing hard on that one. It is great to see 80s music making it into the Hall in force, and not just the 80s rock acts, finally. New wave music was a huge part of the evolution of popular music, so it's great to see the 2 biggest new wave artists of that decade finally getting some respect, with Duran Duran and Eurythmics, in case you couldn't figure that out. It's also great seeing Pat Benatar and Carly Simon finally getting in. Judas Priest finally getting in puts another heavy metal act in, something that you'd think there'd be more of, but Actually, there aren't. Eminem was the one lock to get in, like I've said on past episodes. Dolly didn't originally understand why she's in, but if it wasn't for her, especially her songs in the late 1960s into the early 1970s, female pop music would be completely different. She was one of the first female country artists to make it possible for other country artists like Faith Hill, Shania Twain, and Taylor Swift to cross over into massive popular success, and that is why she is one of the biggest influences in country and pop music. That's why she's in. And that was what she couldn't quite understand until just recently. Now, here's the bad news. Here's who is on the nominations list who didn't get in. Rage Against the Machine, Devo, Dionne Warwick, the New York Dolls, Beck, Kate Bush, A Tribe Called Quest, MC5, and Fela Kuti. Okay, how the hell did Lionel Richie get in but not Rage Against the Machine, or for that matter, any of the other ones? Sorry, I am really trying to swallow hard on that Lionel Richie one, but I'm really pissed off that Rage didn't get in. Anyway, enough about me. The actual Hall of Fame induction ceremony will be held on November 5th at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, California. There are many walks of fame in this world. For instance, there's the Aerospace Walk of Honor in Lancaster, California, the Almeria Walk of Fame in Almeria, Spain, the Australian Film Walk of Fame in Sydney, Australia. However, when you think of walks of fame, you really only think of one. It's the most famous walk of fame of them all. It is the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The idea for the walk was dreamed up by E.M. Stewart, who was the president of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce in 1953. People think that the idea for having stars came from the Hollywood Hotel, which had stars on the ceiling of their dining room. The final parameters for the project were agreed upon in 1955 and presented to the Los Angeles City Council in 1956. Construction for the Walk of Fame started in 1958 and ended in 1960. There were 8 people who were supposed to be given stars first: Olive Borden, Ronald Colman, Louise Fazenda, Preston Foster, Burt Lancaster, Edward Sedgwick, Ernest Torrance, and Joan Woodward. However, director Stanley Kramer is credited with having his star installed on the actual Walk of Fame first, on March 28, 1960. Popular myth is that Joanne Woodward was the first star, but she was the first person to be photographed posing with her star, so that myth stuck. It is also her and that posing with the star that turned into a huge ceremony that is now tradition these days. The walk covers 1.3 miles down Hollywood Boulevard with a few side streets added as space permits. As of the beginning of 2020, there were 2,690 stars. The stars are awarded in 5 different categories: film, television, theater/live performance, radio, and music. For our podcast, we will only be dealing with artists who were awarded in at least the radio and music categories. People who get stars have to pay $50,000 for the upkeep to the star. Every year, the Chamber of Commerce gets over 200 names for consideration for a star, but only 20 to 24 stars are awarded during a normal year. There has only been one star that is not put on a sidewalk. It is Muhammad Ali's, because he didn't want it to be walked on because he was a champion, and rightfully so. He was inducted into the Theater Live Performance category, and his star is on a wall at Hollywood and Highland at 6801 Hollywood Boulevard, just in case you're in the LA area and want to stop by and see it one time. There also have been given special stars out to people who were part of the Hollywood community, such as former Los Angeles mayor, the late Tom Bradley, an honorary mayor of Hollywood, and the guy most associated with promoting the Walk of Fame, the late Johnny Grant. There have been stars given as well to people who were not entertainers but had done important things, such as the crew of Apollo 11. Usually, those stars are put in the live performance category, much like Muhammad Ali, because he was boxing on television. There have been two presidents who were given stars, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Reagan was given one for his radio and acting career, and Trump because of his TV show, The Apprentice. Only one star so far in the history of the Walk of Fame has ever been considered for removal from the Walk of Fame, Donald Trump's. As of yet, no final decision has been made about removing it. Politics, you know. I highly doubt it's getting removed. Let us talk about a musical Walk of Fame recipient. His nickname was Rod the Mod. Sir Roderick Stewart made his name first as lead singer of the groups Steam Packet, Shotgun Express, the Jeff Beck Group, The Dimensions, Long John Baldry, and The Faces. In the early 1970s, while a member of The Faces, Rod started doing solo albums as a side project. Once his solo career was established with hits like Maggie May, and due to the usual creative differences in a group, Rod left The Faces and went into his solo career full-time. Rod's combination of pop, rock, folk, and soul music gave him a very successful solo career. He was also one of the artists who was using music videos as an art form in the 1970s, way before everybody else, which helped him become extremely popular in the 1980s once MTV became popular and they needed music videos to play at that point. In the 1980s, Rod went from doing disco to new wave and adult contemporary. In the new millennium, he started by doing American standards, but has since found his way back to doing his adult contemporary sound. Along the way, he's recorded such songs as Maggie May, Tonight's the Night, Infatuation, Hot Legs, Every Picture Tells a Story, Reason to Believe, I Don't Want to Talk About It, The First Cut is the Deepest, Tonight I'm Yours, Young Turks, Baby Jane, Some Guys Have All the Luck, People Get Ready, Every Beat of My Heart, Forever Young, This Old Heart of Mine, Downtown Train, Rhythm of My Heart Can't Tell You No, The Motown Song, etc., etc. Let's just say the guy's had a ton of hits. He has also been put on many of the best of lists, including number 17 on Billboard's Greatest Artists of All Time list and number 59 on Rolling Stone's list of Greatest Singers of All Time. He has been knighted by the Queen of England and is actually in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. In 2012, he was inducted as a member of The Faces. 8 years later, he was in as a solo artist. Located at 6801 Hollywood Boulevard at the corner of Hollywood and Highland in front of the Foot Locker, you will find the star of Sir Rod Stewart on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, California. And that is it for the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode 29. Thanks for listening. Audio engineering and editing, video editing, writing, narration, basically everything having to do with this podcast is done by yours truly. You can find us on our website at cjbtproductions.com. Our podcast is on all of your favorite podcast providers such as Apple Music, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Spotify, etc., all under Music History Today. If you would like to support this podcast, our Patreon can be found at patreon.com/Music History Today. We are also on Twitter at Music History Day, and you can now find us on YouTube. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell anytime you want to know exactly what videos are dropped and when. All of those links can be found in the show notes below. Thank you very, very much for listening.